Uh-oh, I've been thinking. And for a long time, many of us thought that narcissism was simply like this personality disorder that belonged to those people over there, not to me. We picture the arrogant husband or that manipulative boss or some abusive parent. And that keeps the perspective of narcissism something external, not something outside of us. But many people are starting to wake up to something a little bit deeper inside. Narcissistic dynamics are not just traits in individuals. They're actually these relational patterns that entire families and organizations and religions and corporations and even cultures unconsciously reinforce. And that doesn't mean that everyone is narcissistic, like in a clinical sense, but it does mean environments reward behaviors that revolve around protecting our identity and controlling other people's perception and avoiding vulnerability and seeking external validation. And some of those dynamics, I'm going to list a couple here. They include prioritizing your self-image over the truth, or needing people to agree with you more than even trying to understand them, or defending your identity instead of getting curious, or seeing and valuing people primarily for what they provide rather than who they actually are, or even using shame and fear in order to belong, or making any attempt to control and misidentifying that as love. Or sometimes we confuse admiration with intimacy, and that's not true either. And we become more attached to being right than reality. And those patterns exist somewhere on a spectrum. And almost everyone can recognize some of these traits in yourself. At least I hope so, because they're common human defenses, especially when we're under stress. So the deeper energetic pattern that we're starting to see collectively, like in the underbelly, if you will, the core of narcissistic dynamics arise when the survival of the ego becomes more important than one's relationship with reality. It's when the nervous system begins protecting your identity instead of coming to grips with the truth. And so as we evolve, we begin asking, really, what is true, instead of what do I need to believe in order for me to feel safe and right? And as we evolve, the questions change to, how did my actions affect you? Instead of, oh, how do I avoid feeling all this shame? And as we evolve, we start asking, who are you, rather than how do I feel? How do you make me feel about myself? Instead of who they are. And that energy becomes more self-referential instead of self-defending, self-protecting, or getting something from another person. You guys, many people are becoming more educated about trauma attachment and emotional abuse and coercive control and boundaries and manipulation. And even social media has also made it easier for people to compare their experiences and recognize patterns that stayed hidden in past generations. And as these awarenesses grow, those behaviors that once seemed normal are now being questioned. These things that our parents never even thought to challenge, they're now being challenged in our generation. It's so cool to me. For example, like parents are apologizing to their children, and that's new. Or women are questioning whether their highest value is in self-sacrifice. And men are questioning whether emotional suppression is supporting their success in relationships and at the office or on the job. Employees are challenging their toxic workplaces, and they're demanding fair treatment. Yoo-hoo! People are leaving high control religious groups because they're finding better answers to living in joy and harmony than what the religion has to offer. And even romantic partners are learning about consent and the necessity of this emotional attunement in relationship. And these shifts naturally expose dynamics that previously went unnamed. They didn't have any structure. They had been normalized as if it was just what we had to live with. And here's the paradox. One of the fascinating things about learning about narcissistic dynamics is that the mature response isn't simply to identify all the narcissists out there. Nope. The evolved position is to begin asking, where do I protect my identity instead of telling the truth? Where do I censor? How am I hiding myself? Where do I put on some performance about my competence because I'm so afraid of looking like a fool? Where do I seek other people's admiration instead of seeking a genuine connection with them? Where am I manipulating outcomes because this uncertainty scares me? Where do I make another person's emotions all about me or my responsibility to fix and repair? This isn't about labeling yourself as a narcissist. That's not what I'm saying. It's about rooting the collective sickness out of you. It's about recognizing that many of the defensive patterns are just humans. They're a human trait, but your increased self-awareness allows you to respond differently. It allows you to evolve if you choose. And what might be emerging collectively, we're understanding that narcissism is less about exposing these individual villains and more about exposing systems that have been organized around fear and image and domination and control. And you guys, we are collectively shifting from performance into authenticity. We're shifting from needing control and instead we're demanding consent. We're shifting from a hierarchy into a higher state of mutuality. And we're shifting from needing certainty in order to feel safe into curiosity. We're no longer demanding perfection from each other, but we are expecting accountability. And those who are evolving are no longer seeking power over other people. They're seeking power with other people. And as these things are shifting, our old beliefs are loosening. And people are becoming more capable of saying, you know what, I was wrong. Or I don't know. Or, I can see that hurt you and I want to understand more. Or, I don't need to control your reality in order to feel secure in my reality. And as we participate in this evolution together, we can create healthier relationships because these types of upgrades prioritize reality and connection over protecting one's self-image. That's a shift away from narcissistic defenses. And it's not because people become perfect or better than other people. It's because people are more willing to examine themselves alongside other people. Guys, it's a messy shift, but the shift is happening. And you can call me an optimist, but I am surrounded by people who are letting go of these old, outdated, insecure traits. And they're becoming more honest with themselves. I'm becoming more honest with myself and how I show up in relationships and how I show up in the world. And it's like lifting this burden right off my back. And I can see other people who have done it. They're embodying their true authenticity. And things are starting to shift. And I'm real excited about it. And I hope you are too. And if you want to learn more about this, I'm going to be talking about it more. So start following me.